Forrest, you ready for today's program?
Yeah, man. I'm ready to start whenever you are.
Alrighty, well, let's get right into it. We have a call already, so let's talk to Tom, who is calling from Michigan. Tom, you're live on Talk Heathen today. What is happening?
Not a whole lot. There's a little snow here, but it's a pretty nice day.
Well, that's good. That's good. What do you want to talk to us about today, Tom?
The movie The Big Lebowski and then The Religion of Dudeism.
Okay, yeah. So I've seen Big Lebowski. Have you seen Big Lebowski?
I've seen The Big Lebowski.
It's been many years. So, what specifically about Dudeism did you want to talk about? Because, you're not going to say, it's real, right? You're not going to say, it's... I mean, if you're an emphatic believer in the tenets, I suppose that means it's real. But, it doesn't make any claims to, a god or anything, right?
No.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to have to be refreshed on Dude.
Yeah.
I didn't want to have this whole...
Yeah. Yeah. So go ahead, Tom. Tell us what you want to say.
Well, in order to call in, I had to identify as a theist.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the people who study religion will say there's monotheism, there's polytheism, there's deism.
Sure.
So it's a lot of, I don't care. But when I talk to atheists, they want me to give a definition of the God that I believe in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what do you believe in?
In a strict definition, I would say I'm a deist.
Okay.
God does exist, but he's not involved in my life.
All right. What's your reason for that?
Over the years, people have asked me to prove a miracle or demonstrate a miracle, and I can't do that.
Okay.
So I've watched the movie The Big Lebowski, and I've learned to just sit back and chill. That these definitions and proving things, in the long run, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so is that what you mean by Dudeism? You just mean that, you don't really need a reason to believe in the thing, just kind of let your belief be a belief?
Correct.
Okay. So what would you say would be the difference between yourself and someone like Forrest and I who don't actually have a God belief?
I think it's a lot about relaxing and not trying to prove something.
Sure.
And I also think it's a difference between an organized religion where there's a building and I don't want to say scripture, but a written down on paper set of rules.
Okay.
And a worldview where it's just kind of an attitude or a philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I feel like you can have those kinds of attitudes and not be a deist, though, right? So, there's, strains of Buddhism, for example, that don't have any kind of God belief, but still have practices and tenets to a philosophy. Taoism is similar in that regard. Confucianism is often argued as a religion and doesn't have any strict adherence to any gods. So, I guess what I'm getting at is, why call yourself a deist at that point? In other words, what's the difference between just living your life how you feel like is most optimal versus believing that a God exists, right? Because I feel like those two things are pretty separate.
So in very broad terms, I agree with you.
Okay.
You said Taoism.
Yeah, or Taoism.
And I don't know from a classroom the difference between Dudeism and Taoism. So I think we're playing a word game at that point.
Well, I don't know the difference either off the top of my head, but I think the whole point is there's lots of secular philosophies out there that equate to you could use the word worldview or belief systems or whatever that don't involve a god. So just why bother yourself with adding the God claim in there?
Right, because you did describe yourself as a deist, right? So...
Well, in order to call in, I had to choose between atheist and theist.
Right. But you just explained that you're actually a deist.
General way God exists.
Yeah, but you do think God exists, though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
so that's what we're interested in. Yeah. When we do that, the call screeners do that, it's just for our sake, because in general, we do like take precedence for theist callers, right? We want theist callers to call in. So that's just for identification for our sake. It doesn't have to necessarily describe your philosophy in the most accurate terms, right? So like, what we're interested in is you say that a God exists, and we just want to know why. Like, I understand you have a relaxed philosophy that seems very agreeable to us, but that really doesn't have anything to do with whether or not a God exists, right? Or at least you haven't demonstrated that to me to see that connection.
I will just to be a nitpicky. Yeah. It seems agreeable to Dan. I have a lot of problems with it.
Okay,
I don't want to get into that yet. I just
mean like the chill vibe. It's the vibe that I'm okay with.
The vibe is fine.
The vibe is fine.
Vibes are impeccable. Yeah, but
I wouldn't make my philosophical thesis statement, based on
just
Judaism.
chill. Yeah, but anyway. I have several questions for later.
Right, but that's what we're interested in, Tom. Like, you say a God exists. Why should we believe a God exists?
Well, so by definition, God exists, but God's not involved.
Okay.
How do you mean by definition?
I try and make that distinction when someone says, well, do a miracle, and I can't do that.
Right, but what do you mean by definition God exists?
Yeah. So I still, for my worldview, I want God to exist.
Why?
It's a hopeful, wishful kind of, because it makes me happy.
Okay.
Sure. But like that, why is that? I don't understand. If I say like, I would like for there to be a tooth fairy because I'm going to lose a tooth soon and I'd like some extra spending money, you know what I mean?
Or if I said...
I can't then say by definition the tooth fairy does exist because that sounds nice to me.
Or if I said I want to be married to Selena Gomez, that may be a wish that I have, but that doesn't mean that I'm actually married to her, right? Which isn't an actual desire I have, but would be funny.
Right. I'll make sure to tell her you're no longer interested.
Yeah, please do.
Because...
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, you want me to explain a personal belief.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I'm trying to say is God is not personal.
Okay. Well, I can describe things that are impersonal too, though. Like Jupiter is not personal to me, but I can describe that it exists, So why does God evade description? Because you have a belief in him. You have a reason for believing in him. So we're just interested in why.
Okay. So all of these answers are inside my head, not written down on paper.
Yes. That's what we're asking you.
The paper that I don't have isn't inside a building.
Okay.
Right. That's why we're asking you. We're not reading a piece of paper or anything. We're asking you what's inside your head. Why do you conform to this belief?
Well, because it's easier to just go around being happy and not going to a building on a certain day and opening to a certain page.
Right. I dig that. Yeah. Like, really, I'm not trying to overcomplicate it, and I'm really not trying to back you into a corner. Like, what I really want to understand is, like, you keep saying this makes you happy, and you keep saying that it's just easier and that's simple, and this is really the biggest issue I have is would you use this same line of thinking, this same format that you're giving us right now, that you're justifying your belief in God? Would you use that same line of thinking for literally anything else in the entire world? Dan just talked about the planet Jupiter. Never mind the fact that you can go outside and look at the telescope and look at it. If I asked you if Jupiter existed, or if you asked me, and my answer was, it's easier just to kind of go around with Jupiter, man. If I don't have to read a science book, if I just think that Jupiter exists, it makes me smile. Yeah. Is that a good enough reason to believe in that? If I told you the exact same thing about the Easter Bunny, would you accept it then? Like, what? Why would you use that for that if you wouldn't use it for anything else? Or would you use that for anything else is an important question.
So if you're asking me about spirits, angels, demons, ghosts,
anything,
I'd probably use the same definition.
Okay.
But if it's something that's physical, like the Eiffel Tower or the Statue of Liberty, no, I wouldn't.
Okay, so like, what if we make up something? Like, what if I talk about something that I've said before is like in my office back at my home, I've got a closet, and in that closet there's a goblin. His name is Roland, and he grants wishes and eats Subway sandwiches, and he disappears every time you open the door. is it good enough for me to say this belief makes me happy? I don't have to read a book about it. I don't have to know anything about goblins. I just know there's a goblin and he's pretty cool. He's a good dude. And like sometimes he doesn't grant wishes. Sometimes he does. Sometimes he grants them later and doesn't tell me. Like it's whatever. Is that an okay thing for me to say? Or does that sound kind of weird? Would you accept that I said, like, you think that's appropriate?
No, I would accept that.
Why?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate.
Okay, so if I tell you that I believe there's a goblin living in my
movie,
closet eating Subway sandwiches, you think that I'm a sane and rational human being for these reasons?
I know lots of children that have imaginary friends. It doesn't bother me.
But we know that.
Yeah, lots of children do, and then children tend to grow up and get out of that, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, Tom. We know they're imaginary friends. Like, you just call them imaginary yourself, right?
We're going around in circles.
I know. Well, Tom, you say that this belief makes you happy, and here's the thing, right? We also don't go to church. We also don't vow to a scripture, and we're pretty happy too. We don't need a God belief to do that, right? So, maybe that God belief does make you happy. I won't take that away from you. What I'm trying to ask is, okay, but a belief can make you happy, but it can also not be true, right? So do you believe, when you say that you believe in God, do you believe that's a true fact, or do you just believe that because it makes you happy? Because, like, if you just believe it makes you happy, I can't do anything for you. But, like, if you believe it as a fact, that changes things, right? That does change the nature of what you're saying.
Right. That's no longer an imaginary friend. That's a statement about reality, and that matters.
So very quickly, 2 points.
Yeah.
Number one is the definition of God, whether God is personal or impersonal. But more to the point, the second point, in the movie The Big Lebowski, at the end, I forget his name, but he dies and he's cremated. And the two guys, the dude and his friend, they throw the ashes into the air at the ocean. And the ashes fly back into the face of the dude. And he doesn't care. He doesn't have any deep philosophical moment when these ashes of a human being fly into his face. It's just, I can get along. And that's the attitude that I try to have. If you don't believe in God, fine. If you want to run in circles and try and prove that God doesn't exist, the burden of proof is on you to prove God is personal, and we'll just run in circles.
Right. I guess the thing is, like, what I can't get past is that you keep explaining this philosophy of just like, it is what it is. Very stoic, very kind of a semi-existentialist, kind of nihilist, just like, whatever, just it's fine, it is what it is, I'm going to live. And that all sounds lovely. I don't see the connection between that and making a statement about anything being true. And the question that I asked earlier that I don't think, like, maybe I didn't phrase it right, is that would you use that for anything else? Like, my job I'm a biologist, and I teach biology online. So, like, right now, when I go back home to Tulsa in a couple of days, I'm gonna have to go back into a lab and do testing and send samples off and get numbers and write about what I've found and why that matters. Do you think it would be appropriate for me to write in a report like, yeah, you know what, I got these numbers, but it doesn't really matter. I kind of feel like it should be this way anyway, and it should be this other thing, and like that. Would that be an acceptable way for me to write a scientific report? Would that be a thing that I could then build knowledge on? Could I then go teach that to my classes and go tell a bunch of kids, like, hey, you know what? I'm pretty sure there were dinosaurs, but maybe there weren't. Who cares? It's just whatever. You believe what you want to believe. Is that an appropriate way to live in any other intellectual circumstance ever, forever? Like, is there any other time you would use the philosophy that you're giving us here in terms of truth statements? Not just whether you're happy or not, or whether you care about this or that. In terms of making a statement of something being true, is there ever a time you would do this ever in any other circumstance?
Very quickly, no.
Okay. That's important to me.
There's two
Why
things
not?
going on.
Why not?
So there's two situations. There's one is, if I was a judge in a courtroom, no, you'd have to have evidence,
right?
Not just wishful pie in the sky beliefs.
Yes,
right.
But outside of work, outside of an occupation, when I'm on vacation at the beach, That's the whole point of relaxing is not to worry about those things, about what happens after life.
No, but listen, you need evidence for things outside of a courtroom, right? Like, if you want to know that your car is going to work in the morning,
but
you want to know that there's evidence that your car has worked in the past, right? But Tom, you use evidence for things every day in your life.
Funeral parlor, only in the morgue.
Tom, what we're pointing out
in the morgue.
Tom, what we're pointing out is that it seems like you're making an exception to a general rule that you probably use for every other aspect of your life, which is you use evidence
that's exactly what I'm doing.
But why? Why would you do that?
That sounds horrible to do.
Because there's an exception to the rule.
Why would there be an exception to the rule?
Because not all frogs are frogs, or not all animals are frogs. All frogs are animals, but not all animals are frogs.
Okay. But
I don't know what to make of that. We weren't talking about frogs. We were talking about
but I don't believe in reincarnation.
Okay, well, see, why it sounds like you're just picking and choosing.
But what if I said I do believe in reincarnation because it makes me smile and it does, would that be a convincing argument for you to then decide to believe in reincarnation because it makes me happy? Because it's like, why would that matter? Either something is true or it isn't. And so, like, if I'm talking about the way that I look at life, like, I have no problem with the philosophical claims that you're making. Like, I love my favorite schools of philosophy are Stoicism and cosmic nihilism and existentialism. I love that. But if I were to sit here and talk about those things with the same way that I talk about science, it would be as inappropriate as the way if I talked about science, the way I talk about those things.
Yeah.
It makes no difference what your personal philosophy or your views on life or anything like that are. Either something is true or it isn't. So I guess the biggest question that I have for you, Tom, is does it matter to you if you believe something that's true or not? If you believe something that isn't true, does that matter to you?
You did it as a positive, and then you did it as a negative.
It should go both ways.
It's important that things are true. I'll do it as a positive.
Sure.
Yes, I believe it's important that things are true and factual.
Okay.
Cool. So then why wouldn't you apply that kind of critical thinking to your God claim as well?
And last response here, because we got to move on to some other callers.
Yeah. So my definition of God is that it does exist, but it doesn't interact with my life.
Right.
Let's do it in a scientific way. Yes, I believe there's oxygen. And yes, I believe oxygen is factually important for my breathing and living.
Okay.
I've been told there's liquid methane under pressure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't. It's there, but it doesn't affect my life, so I don't care about it. Out of sight, out of mind. It would have to impact my life on a personal level before I would care about it.
Well,
and God doesn't meet that threshold of impact.
Right. So if I sit here and say, like, I don't believe that liquid methane exists when we have proof that it does, but it doesn't affect me, so I don't believe that it exists. Does that matter?
Yeah. So I'm making the distinction between it's factually there and by distinction, it has some kind of cause and effect on my daily life. That's where you and I are not connecting on that one point.
Yes, because Tom, the world is bigger than just you and I, and there's a lot of things that exist that don't impact my personal life. That doesn't mean that we could just maybe call it yes or no, whether they exist or not.
Yeah, that's the thing. I want to believe true things, whether or not they directly impact me. You know, the orbit of Pluto doesn't impact me. But
Tom, we really got to go because we've been on this call for a bit, and we got some other people that want to talk to us. But I do.
It's me rambling. I apologize.
No, it's fine. I do appreciate you calling in. I hope we made our points clear. But yeah, like, we don't just believe stuff because, it makes us happy. I mean, like, everybody has those kinds of beliefs on, like, a smaller scale.
Yeah, philosophically, sure. Like, the way that I decide to handle a good or a bad situation, that's totally philosophical. But, like, that's because that is subjective by definition.
Right.
Nobody who can tell me, objectively if this was a happy or a sad thing.
Right. And when we talk about that, we usually mean in how we make decision-making things in our lives. Yeah. That's different from, like, things existing or not.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Which is, like, a different category of object. But, Tom, I hope we got our point across. Again, like, the vibes, you want to treat others well, and
That's rad.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Hawaiian shirts every day. I'm all about that. But like, that doesn't mean that we can't just throw every reality out the window and just say, well, I like this because it's cool. You know, I don't know.
Something's true or it's not. And
right.
It's important.